Hey guys, it is module 2, and we are starting to figure out where spring is, right? Hopefully, you guys have had a little bit. Well, you guys didn't have a break, did you? For if you're on the main campus, you had a bit of a spring break. If you are not, like most of us, we had no spring break whatsoever, and that was kind of evil for even me to say something. And I'm sorry. Sorry. All right, so let's take a look at what we're doing here. Let me share our module 2. We have a lot of stuff to do today, and I'm gonna kind of whip through a couple of things. Okay. There we go. Okay. Okay. Now we just have to find the right screen. Okay. Two. I have an overview. Don't forget the syllabus and schedule has a link with all of the dates. So if you want to take back a look at that and help yourself plan through the module, please do that. Keeping in mind that it's, in my opinion, here in case I know, read the announcements and or your email. So I'm going to walk you through my thoughts on it just as a reminder. So let's kind of go over to the announcements here. My questions for the timing of the course. They're in your email. They're also in the announcements. Mondays, start the readings. Of course, it's going to not listen to us. Technology. Okay. Monday, start the readings. Listen to the video tech sessions. That's this. Usually I have this posted by late afternoon on Monday, sometimes earlier. On Tuesdays and Wednesdays, finish the readings and the live tech reflection. Those off of your plate so you don't have to worry about them. Post your initial post to the discussion board. That will make sense to you because you will have done all the readings. You have to do the reading before the posting anyway. Friday and or Saturday, post peer responses to the discussion board. I know not due until Sunday. Do them earlier because then you get to see what other people are doing, and that will inform you about what you're doing. And also, they will be able to read your comments and utilize them in the additions or thoughts of their own stuff. So if you do it on Sunday, it doesn't make any sense to me. On Sunday, you're going to have already or finished reading those peer responses and finishing all the assignment submissions. Some of you, like in the past, because you're students, right, you wait and do everything on Saturday or Sunday, and that means that you're not getting a whole lot of out of everything, and you're rushing through everything, and you're not enjoying it. And that's important because this is something that we should really enjoy. I enjoying it anyway. Because it's intended to be enjoyable. So we're going to go into module 2 back, take a look at what we're going to do. All those things that I just mentioned, overview, you're going to want to take a look at. Then as far as the readings, okay, so the readings are listed in the syllabus. They're also listed here. You're going to be learning about, you're going to be becoming more informed about types of reading. So as I said last module, I hope you read everything twice or listen to them. If you're listening to them on video, listen to them twice. The first time, just enjoy it, right? Find out if you like it or not. Sometimes you're going to like them. Sometimes you aren't going to like them. You know, it's okay. Some of the stuff that we read, I like. Some of it, I don't like. That's okay. But you're also going to be then learning about how to look at things a little bit more closely. So the second reading, you want to be looking for some of these things. So for instance, I have highlighted plot. What is the plot? How does the plot work? You know, why do we like some plots and not like others? What is it about them that makes them enjoyable or mysterious? The second thing is characterization. What does it mean to have a good character? What does it mean to have a flat character or a round character or a character we like or a character we like to hate? The third one is setting. Where is the story set? And is that important? Sometimes it's really important. Sometimes it's not as important. You know, why? Time period, it could be a geographical location, all kinds of different places. The third or the fourth one, and this one trips some people up or they get intimidated by it, and that's symbolism or figurative language. This will help you to kind of see what is a symbol, why do we care about the symbols, and how can I find one? And then the last one is a theme. Is there a theme to to the piece. And probably you know the theme sort of innately or unconsciously, but when somebody says, hey, what's the theme? Then you can freeze and go, oh, I didn't know there was a theme, but there's a theme, right? Sometimes it's growing up, sometimes it's disappointment, sometimes it's lost love, sometimes it's chick flick, whatever it is, there's always something, right? So then you're going to be doing a soft chalk lesson and activity. You'll find out more about that. And then you're going to be reading. So those are the preparatory readings to help you kind of think through what you're going to be doing. And then you have 4 short stories. These are fun and they are short. The first one is The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. The second one is Sonny's Blues by James Baldwin. Then Wall of Fire Rising by Edwidge Danticat. And I Love You to Want Me by Viet Thanh Nguyen. So 4 really interesting stories, short ones. And then after you've read all of that, so again, if you're following my suggested timeline, you'll be reading those things today and tomorrow, and then maybe Wednesday, so that you're ready to post that initial post by Thursday. Okay. Remember what the little note that I put on there? I do take late work up to a week. That is what Indiana Tech has provided for. If it's longer than a week, you'd have to have a really good reason and documentation for it. Except for one thing, I won't take late discussion board posts because they don't do you any good and they don't do your any good if you post a late discussion board. So anything else I will take late up to 1 week. Okay. All right. Now you know what you're doing. Look at where you're going to put them. Okay. So that's under activities and assessments. You're going to submit these here. And this is a thing. Make sure that, by the way, discussion board do have direct instructions about how both to post and also how to respond. Forget this part, how to respond. Be answering these 3 things here, responses to your peers. Okay, that's the ones I suggest doing both Friday or Saturday. What do you think is one of the main themes of the story? What literary devices or elements lead you to that conclusion? In other words, what does all of this analysis help you understand? And finally, what ultimately help me understand or fully? Okay, so you're going to be reading the posts of at least 2 other people and then posting on their posts some questions and answers, thoughts about what they're writing. Okay, now notice up here, if you outline carefully, you want to do that. So for short stories, right? Of those. Okay, so it's not, you might imagine you're going to be reading the stories and choose one to. Okay? That you'll be, after you've scoring and just your peers, listeners, you're going to be writing a requirements for what that means. So most of you again aren't English majors, although you've written probably for various types of other classes, you may not have written anything that directly analyzes a work of literature. These like this, and you can tweak it to make it work for you. For example, the short story Wall of Fire Rising by Edwidge Danticat demonstrates that demonstrates how blah blah blah. Right? Are there any perhaps there's multiple kinds of conflict. You might even look up types of conflict in a story. There's man against nature, right? So that's conflict like a tornado. There's man against another man or woman. And that might be where there's a fight between two people, right? Maybe a sword fight. There could be man/woman, person. Again, a doubt about myself in some particular way. I'm not sure what I should do, so I'm conflicted about it. Should I do this? Should I do that? I don't know. I have conflict, right? Conflicted with machines. What do we do with that conflict? Lots of different types of conflict. I won't go through all of those. You will read about those when you do the reading. Then you're going to do a paragraph for characterization. So you're going to analyze the main characters using the terms static, or dynamic. So static is maybe they changed their mind. They were good, but then sometimes they're bad, or bad most of the time, and sometimes they're good. So what does that demonstrate about them? And then connect it back to your thesis. Remember, your thesis is, demonstrates what? Demonstrates how, right? You have to come up with that particular thing. Okay, so after the characterization, then the next paragraph analyzes settings and why they matter. For some of you, this will be which one you choose, whether the setting is really important, sort of important, or lesser importance, and why. Okay. Next, a paragraph that analyzes symbols or figurative language, and again, connect it back to your thesis. By the way, you don't have to write your introduction and thesis first. So most people do, but some people will write the paragraphs first and then go back after they've figured out where where all these things go. Then they go back and write the introduction. It's possible. Do what works for you. And finally, a conclusion that brings this all together, stating how the story helps us understand this sort of significance in the character's life, or our lives, or humans, or whatever. Okay. So again, make sure that you follow these instructions. Make sure that you can understand that has read your story. So you don't need to summarize it at nauseum. Assume we already know the story and we don't need for you to tell it again to us. So the only time you'll be quoting is if you're giving examples. So for example, they said this, for example, dynamic. So you're analyzing the story and interpreting the story and bringing this back together. So you're not summarizing, you're analyzing. Difference, okay? Again, this should be in MLA format with an in-text citation, meaning you're citing from the source, and you have a works cited listing the source that you've chosen. And includes multiple passages from the story, at least 5. Those can be short, they can be long, they can be whatever you need, but at least 5. Okay, you're writing approximately 3 to 4 pages for this essay. Okay, now again, there's a is really intended to help you to see. You want to look at the rubric before you turn it in. So look through and go, did I follow the criteria? Is my thesis, is my characterization, is my saying? So it's just kind of reminders that you have hit everything. Don't forget stuff. Okay, so and then of course tech live reflection. So those are the things you're going to be accomplishing this particular week. As always, it's a lot of stuff, right? All right, we are going to then go into this lesson is in module 2. And then, well, I want you to go through this more slowly, but I want to kind of go through this to point out a couple things. So literary devices, some of the things we've just talked about. The plot, there's a really interesting plot. If you're visual like I am, this might be helpful to you. Make this bigger. Oops. And this is called the Freytag pyramid. see, there's what we call the exposition. And these are, by the way, these are all going to make sense. All these terms are going to make more sense after you do the reading. Okay. There's an exposition. There's some sort of inciting incident. Maybe the character is going along just fine. Everything's hunky-dory. Yay, happy. Something happens. They lose their keys, whatever the case may be. Something happens that incites the rest of the events, right? Then there's a rising action. And you know this because you kind of feel it, right? That, ooh, there's serial killers coming or zombies or whatever. I can feel that it's coming. Then there's often what we call a complication. Sometimes it's, we've lost the keys. We've gone through a lot of work and poof, we found the keys. Finally, everything's resolved. And then there's a complication. Those keys have been bugged. Dun, 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 whatever. Okay. So then there's a climax. That's the top of the actions, kind of the top of the roller coaster before you you hang in there a little bit before you drop, right? That climax of, oh. Sometimes we have what's called a reversal then. This is where you're kind of on the downward slide. You're going to solve the mystery. You feel it's coming. The action sort of falls down. There's a resolution of some kind. And what we call the end, which is you get to learn a French word today, denouement. That's your French word. There is this picture of a set. I'll point out the stuff that's actually here so that you can spend a little more time with it. And eventually, hopefully I can go to the next page. There we go. So literary devices characterization, this is where we're going to find those words static or dynamic. And they give you some examples. If a character doesn't change, why doesn't it? That should be a clue, right? Why do they not change? If they do change, why do they change? Is there something about the nature of the character that prevents them from making this growth? Did they miss the opportunity to understand the world better? Or maybe it's a stability thing, right? So what is it about this that you I just recommend reading these 4 pages that will give you some that we can still understand the story without picking the symbols, but the symbols give us sort of an extra layer of interesting thought process, right? Which helps us to determine the theme. What's the theme? All of these things together help us to figure out what the theme is. On these particular things, I'm just picking theme, sequence, plot to click on and make it work. Right, so you can see it a little bit more. This is what we're going to sort of help to figure out what we're doing next, or how, where do these things particularly fit, and how should I analyze them, or should I not care? Majority of today talking through these really interesting short stories, or parts and pieces of them. So we're going to start now. I want to show you this. I will provide this for you, this link for you. This is, as you can see, an hour and almost 5 minutes long. It is a total reading of the short story Sonny's Blues. I love Sonny's Blues. Here's the start. I read about in the paper in the subway on my way to work. I read it and I couldn't believe it. And I read it again. Then perhaps I just stared at it, at the newsprint spelling out his name, spelling out the story. I stared at it in the swinging lights of the subway car and in the faces and bodies of the people. and in my own face, trapped in the darkness which roared outside. I won't read through that for you, but if you want somebody to read this whole story to you, I will get this link to you. What I am going to much quicker version. Now, before I start this, you as you notes, especially if it's one of the short stories that you decide to use, and you can also write down timestamp. Remember it, write the timestamp down so you can find it again. Okay, so here we go. This is a great little video about Sonny's Blues by James Baldwin.
My name is Ryan, and let's hit the ground running with this first short story Saturday. We are going to be reading Blues by James Baldwin, first published in 1957 and then later collected in Going to Meet the Man. Buckle up, because we don't have much time to talk about this. So in Sonny's Blues, we've got Harlem, as well as his wife and his young daughter. And then we have Sonny, his brother. All of these characters exist in Harlem, and Baldwin uses the word dark or darkness to describe a place about every other line, and there is a reason for that. Harlem, for black families and black boys like our narrator and his Sonny is a Harlem says some escaped the trap. Who got out always left something of themselves behind, as some animals amputate a leg and leave it in the trap. We start the story as our narrator has is the hardest kind of distance, isn't it? Not the person who you've never known who is distant from you, but the person who you've known like a brother who is now unreachably far from you. But then one of Sonny's friends, someone else who is tangled up in this kind of lifestyle, comes to talk to the narrator. Every few pages, either because of flashback or new knowledge or what's happening in the story, we, as well as the narrator, learn a little bit more about Sonny's. Sonny watch Sonny come along playing piano as club. Into this final scene, this beautiful image, this heart-wrenching scene. Impossible because of the way that distance and point of view are working. This is Sonny's story, but it's told in first-person narration from the brother, the one person who is agonizingly close to Sonny and also unreachably far. The person who, after an entire story's worth of work, can finally see Sonny, but can't access his consciousness. To me, Sonny's Blues is a story, like a lot of stories, honestly, about how the distance between two minds is so incredibly vast, but also almost accessible. And that final scene, that final close but not quite close enough, that final seeing but not quite seeing what's going on, that scene is not possible unless you have the incredible distance between. It has to be the brother, the person who grew up with Sonny. Of this story, in my opinion at least, you go from incredible distance to agonizingly close, and James Baldwin knew exactly what he was doing when he decided upon the distance of that arc. Any closer to Sonny and we would actually be in his head, which that can't happen because the entire story is about how hard he is to understand. But any farther, and the story would fall flat. We wouldn't get to see everything, which there's so much more that we could talk about regarding Sonny's Blues. It's a crazy, lovely story. It's basically the reason that I think that art has a place in my life, but it's also only possible because of the way that distance and point of view are working together in this story. Anyways, thanks for hanging out with me as I geek out about this story. Thanks for stopping by the first.
Now that was really fast, right? I will provide that link for you if you want a little hooks. They're kind of like entryways into the story, right? To help you see what somebody else sees in it. What So they sing in it. Another of the stories I want to take a look at, or speaking, Kate Chopin was one of the very first women to write. She was one of the first women to work in the and be her own publicist. So that might have some bearing in the theme as well. Let's take a look.
For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read and recorded by Heather Ordover, mamaoknits.blogspot.com. Croton-on-Hudson, New York, February 20th, 2006. The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. Knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with a heart trouble, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. It was her sister Josephine who told her, in broken sentences, veiled hints that revealed in half-concealing. Her husband's friend Richards was there too, near her. It was he who had been in the newspaper office when intelligence of the railroad disaster was received, with Brentley Mallard's name leading the list of killed. He had only taken the time to assure himself of its truth. Telegram, and had hastened to forestalling less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad message. She did not hear the story as many women have heard the same, with a paralyzed inability to accept its significance. She wept at once, with sudden, wild abandonment, in her sister's arms. When the storm of grief had spent itself, she went away to her room alone. She would have no one follow her. There stood, facing the open window, a comfortable, roomy armchair. Into this she sank, pressed down by a physical exhaustion that haunted her body and seemed to reach into her soul. She could see in the open square before her the tops of trees that were all aquiver with new spring life. A peddler was crying his wares, the notes of a distant. There were patches of blue sky showing here and there and piled one above the other in the west facing her window. She sat with her head thrown back upon the cushion of the chair, quite motionless, except when a sob came up into her throat and shook her, as a child who has cried itself to sleep continues to sob in its dreams. She was young, with a fair, calm face whose lines bespoke repression and even a certain strength. But now there was a dull stare in her eyes, whose gaze was fixed away off yonder on one of those patches of blue sky. It was not a glance of reflection, but rather it indicated a suspension of intelligent thought. There was something coming to her, and she was waiting for it, fearfully. What was it? She did not know. It was too subtle and elusive to name, but she felt it, creeping out of the sky. They were reaching toward her through the sounds, the scents, the color that filled the air. Now her bosom rose and fell tumultuously. She was beginning to recognize this thing that was approaching to possess her, and she was striving to beat it back with her will, as powerless as her two white, slender hands would have been. When she abandoned herself, a little whispered word escaped her slightly parted lips. She said it over and over under her breath. Free, free, free.
Just to pause for a second. Does this sound like a woman who is sad about her husband being reported to be dead? Or is she realizing something else? She's chanting free.
The vacant stare and the look of terror that had followed it went from her eyes. They stayed keen and bright. Her pulses beat fast and the coursing blood warmed and relaxed every inch of her body. She did not stop to ask if it were or were not a monstrous joy that held her. A clear and exalted perception enabled her to dismiss the suggestion as trivial. She knew that she would weep again when she saw the kind, tender hands folded in death, the face that had never looked, save with love, upon her, fixed and gray and dead. But she saw beyond that bitter moment a long procession of years to come that would belong to her absolutely, and she opened and spread her arms out to them in welcome. There would be no one to live for during those coming years. She would live for herself. There would be no powerful will bending hers in that blind persistence with which men and women believe they have to impose a private will creature. A kind intention or a cruel intention made the act seem no less a crime as she looked upon it in that brief moment of illumination. And yet, she had loved him sometimes. Often she had not. What did it matter? What could love, the unsolved mystery, count for in the fate of this possession of self-assertion, which she suddenly recognized as the strongest impulse of her being? Free, body and soul free, she kept whispering. Josephine was kneeling before the closed door with her lips to the keyhole, imploring for admission. Louise, open the door, I beg. Open the door. You will make yourself ill. What are you doing, Louise? For heaven's sake, open the door. Go away. I am not making myself ill. No. She was drinking in a very elixir of life through that open window. Her fancy was running riot all along those days ahead of her. Spring days and summer days and all sorts of days that would be her own. She breathed a quick prayer that life might be long. It was only yesterday she had thought with shudder that life might be long. She arose at length and opened the door to her sister's importunities. There was a feverish triumph in her eyes, and she carried herself unwittingly like a goddess of victory. She clasped her sister's waist, and together they descended the stairs. Richard stood waiting for them at the bottom. Someone was opening the front door with a latchkey. It was Brentley Mallard who entered, a little travel-stained, composedly carrying his gripsack and umbrella. He had been far from the scene of the accident, and did not even know there had been one. He stood amazed at Josephine's piercing cry, at Richard's quick motion to screen him from the view of his wife. When the doctors came, they said she had died of heart disease, of the joy that killed.
Let that one sit with you for a minute. Definitely a dynamic character, right? Things change, right? We don't know too much about Brentley, other than through the eyes of his wife. But something makes she's sort of free. The themes and things before you figure out what you think of it. Okay. A short story called All of Fire Rising. Again, I will post all of these links so that you can look at them at your leisure. Goes.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Balcano. Let's take a look at Edwidge Danticot's short story, A Wall of Fire Rising. First of all, it's important to note that this takes place in Haiti, which is a place where there's widespread poverty. We hear that the family, Guy, Lily, and little Guy,
I'm not real pleased with the sound quality that you're getting from this particular one. So let's see if I can, no, I cannot adjust it. I will post this one for you. She does a really good job in 16 minutes of talking through A Wall of Fire Rising. So I'll post that one for you and let you take a look at it. She's called the 6-minute scholar, only she can't usually stay to 6 minutes because she loves literature far too much. So I will post that one for you. And we're going to move into this one. So we have, this is our last one. Viet Thanh Nguyen is, this is a Viet perspective. And this is actually not him reading his work, but him talking about reading it as an you see it's a transcript. You could read the transcript if you want to. We are going to of it. It's about an hour and some minutes to listen to, about 15 minutes. One.
From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
We're so happy to see all your faces here today. Presenting partners, the Asian American Literary Review, the Asian American Studies program at the University of Maryland, and the Smithsonian Asian Pacific Center. My name is Anya Kreitney, and I'm the program specialist at the Poetry and Literature Center, which is housed in the Library of Congress. I'm also a proud partner in this series, representing and celebrating Asian American literature throughout the country. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping reminders, and then tell you a little bit about the Poetry and Literature Center, and then I'll turn it over to Mimi, who will introduce Viet. So the biggest housekeeping item is to turn off your cell phones or anything that would interrupt the reading this evening. And then also note that participating in today's performance, you agree to give us permission for. And the second piece of things, which you guys should see on sheets, are surveys. And in an ongoing effort to and lastly, a little bit about the Poetry and Literature Center. We're home of the in poetry, currently one Felipe Herrera. www.lla.gov/poetry. And finally, I'm going to turn it over to Mimi.
experiences, our dreams, our nightmares. I begin with war. 2/3 way through the semester now, we are still talking about because a recent New York Times essay, "Our Vietnam War Never Ended." My students, many of whom are have been journeying through Vietnamese American tellings of war and its legacies. In these tellings, we ask, but also who is doing the telling? Purposes of remembrance, the politics of memory, the politics of meaning. In that New York Times essay, Viet writes that anniversary for stories to be told. And he makes the argument that family stories, the stories of refugees, immigrants, loved ones separated, homelands lost, new beginnings in new places, these are war stories, rarely heard, rarely asked to be told. So this year, on the 40th anniversary of the fall of Saigon, what war stories are being told? In his novel, The Sympathizer, offers us a new and its complex aftermath. Here, new meanings made, new understandings of war, its machinations, its costs, its legacy. English and American Studies and Ethnicity at the University of Southern California, along with his first novel, The Sympathizer. He is the author of Race and Resistance, Literature and Politics.
And we did this for the Library of Congress. Congress for hosting me, and all of you for being.
Once you decide the story you're going to choose. So let's kind of go back over here to class. There we go. Okay, so are there anyone here? Is there anyone here who would like to ask questions about any of the things we've kind of covered in brief this afternoon? Okay, I'm going to leave it open for the next 10 minutes or so in case anybody pops in and asks a question. But at this point, the lecture portion of this is finished, and so you guys can go off and get some of this stuff done, get the reflection done.